I don't know how it is where my guest is and all along those lines, but here in Durham, North Carolina, we're still having a little bit of a cold wave, even though it is above freezing right now. But they've been having some temperatures below and underneath 32, sometimes even down to around 17 or something like that. But it's typical North Carolina weather because I think that by Wednesday or Thursday, we might be into the high 60s and the low 70s. So is that typical North Carolina weather? I know a lot of folks have been following the football games and seeing how that is going. Maybe their team won. Maybe their team didn't win, but definitely there's a lot of conversations around what's going on in the NFL and all along those lines. And of course, people are paying attention to politics around the world, including what's going on with Ron DeSantis dropping out, and now it's just Mr. Trump and Nikki Haley that'll be going up against each other on the Republican side, and it'll be probably Biden, even though there are a couple of other candidates that are on the Democratic side. So it looks like we're heading toward a rematch, and I know a lot of folks are not excited about that, but then again, that's just the way things go, and who knows, there can be disruptions, and maybe there'll be some changes that change that. But right now, it does look like we're heading to an Ali Frazier rematch, if I can use that boxing analogy, and all along those lines. But I'm gonna find out from Wendy, who is a HR lady, and a number of other things about her life and what she's got going on, and maybe she's got one of those four teams that is still in it. Because I know we've got Baltimore and Kansas City, and we've got San Francisco against Detroit. So that's the final four that will determine who will be in the Super Bowl next month in February. So we'll see how all of this goes and how it goes, and if Wendy is even into the sports world and all along those lines. I know that you were saying that you get around in that RV, so that's an amazing thing that you actually travel that way and all along those lines, and probably getting a lot of HR clients by traveling that way also. So I was just fascinated by the fact that you're living in an RV. I had a friend of mine that at one point was contemplating getting one of those tiny homes and everything. My apartment isn't exactly big, but I'm sitting there going like, I don't know if I want to live in my closet, which is the size of some of those tiny homes, and all along those lines. But I know that they're much bigger than that. But definitely, I know RVs can be fun because we used to have a Bull Durham Blues Festival here in Durham, and the artists, that is actually what they would use as their dressing rooms, is the RVs that we got from Carolina RV and all along those lines. So it made for a great dressing room for people ranging from Buddy Guy to Coco Taylor to Tommy Castro to a number of other folks that were using that as their dressing room, since we were doing that at that time at the old ballpark. I think we might have had 1 year where we did it at the new ballpark, but that was only 1 year. And then it's been the pandemic and then economic troubles and other things. So it's actually been in kind of not in the area of being done for, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, but who knows, maybe at some point it'll make a return trip. But I didn't know that going into those RVs, and particularly those traveling RVs, can be a fun experience, because sometimes it can be like having a traveling home. You can have your own TV, watch your own movies, and do your own thing in them, and all along those lines. So what got you, I guess the first question is, into this RV lifestyle?
A divorce. So yeah, Wendy Sellers, the HR lady. I have been living in my RV for, oh geez, I want to say 5-6 years now. Could be a little bit longer, but yeah, it was it. I got married and got divorced, and then I was like, I don't know where I want to live. I'll live in an RV for a couple months, and then I was like, this is awesome. I'm never going back to living in a house and paying those bills and doing yard work. So, I currently don't really travel with it, but 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I actually took my RV by myself on a 69-day trip across the United States.
Oh, wow.
And I had a almost 40-foot RV at that time. It was a motorhome, and everything that could possibly happen happened. I actually wrote a little, not a book, a booklet about it. I will try to share that on one of my maybe my LinkedIn, my HR lady LinkedIn, because I just had the booklet redesigned. But yeah, anything that could possibly happen, including a mouse moving in with me, an accident, another accident, blown tires, you name it, it happened. But it was amazing. I got to meet people all over the world, all over the country, I should say. It was right, still in the pandemic. So that was interesting too. And I was staying at wineries and breweries across the United States. So it was pretty awesome. It was an awesome experience. Would I do it again? Heck no, absolutely not.
It sounds like you did not want to do it again. And along same lines and everything. I was just thinking a couple of things. One, I was thinking when you mentioned getting divorced, I'm like, she must not have had any kids because I can't see you putting any schooling into that
Well,
environment. Maybe
actually, since the pandemic and even before the pandemic, but definitely since the pandemic, a lot of people did pull their kids from school, or there was no school because it was remote, and went RVing because that was in depending on where you lived. I live in Florida, so we never closed. But depending on where you live, the only way to get out was to be outdoors, or the only way to do something. So a lot of people during the pandemic did move into RVs with their children and said, we're just going to start traveling and doing homeschooling. And I've met those people, and I've heard really good things, and I've heard really bad things. I've also heard people getting divorced after that.
I'm sure it's probably chased people away and all along those lines. And now you mentioned that you live over there in Florida, which a lot of people know for being the Disney area and everything. So I'm thinking the mouse just wanted to move into some place that he felt comfortable at because he knew that you were a Florida lady. So that mouse was probably like, look, she's a Disney kind of woman, and Mickey seems to get a lot of love. So maybe she'll give me some love as well. So how did you find this mouse, and did you chase the mouse out, or did the mouse get to travel with you to these various parts
The
of the
mouse
state?
traveled with me probably 4 or 5 states. I believe it moved in a desert, probably New Mexico, looking for water and air conditioning. And then I literally had to leave it water because I'm like, you cannot eat my wires. I will die if you eat my wires. And then I would say probably around Arizona, it left. It said, okay, I'm going to a different desert here, but it was a little at that point, that was the least of my worries. I'm like, come on, move in, Mickey. I don't care. I don't care. But I think he really was coming in for the air conditioning, not anything else.
I've been coming in for the air conditioning. I had the pleasure many years ago when I was a teenager of actually I've had most of the regular pets, cats and dogs, and even a rabbit or two and everything. But we did have a pet raccoon when I was in, I think that was junior high or maybe high school. But that was one of the things that we noticed is that they like to have their own life and they will disappear as well because the pet raccoon actually had that call of the wild and wanted to go find I can't remember whether it was a Mr. or Miss Raccoon, but whatever gender it was, it wanted to find its spouse. So it left us alone. And I think that my mom found some of her jewelry out there where the raccoon was being kept because it was being kept outside and all in that space. So we didn't have it that long, but yeah, it decided it wanted to go raise its own family. So we were like your mouse in Arizona, we were like, hey, more power to you. Go out there, have fun. Try not to get killed by the predators that are out there. But we never saw it again, ever again, ever. So, but that is definitely something that we were able to relate to. Now, I love the title of your book, and you've got to explain it to me and everything, and whether it's something that somebody told you or how it came up. Because when I heard that the title of the book was "Suck It Up, Buttercup," I'm going like, "Hey, that's a good title." And then we have a show here called "The Color Whisperer," and which is around interior designing and colors and being unified and kind of in harmony with our colors and what we put in our houses in that sense that my friend Jeanette Chasworth does. But I also saw that you have a book that is about the a nice word for people that might have to do with donkeys and the hole in the back of them, whisperer, and all along those lines. So definitely that was a very catchy title. So I was wondering how you came up with both of these titles and whether somebody told you to suck it up, Buttercup, and whether you had realized that in the HR world and just in business world in general, you might run into some of those a-holes and all along those lines. So I was very curious as to how these
Yeah.
book titles
So
came up.
Suck It Up Buttercup has been a saying of mine for a long time, even though I am the HR lady and I was in HR. But, I just always was like, hey, suck it up, Buttercup. Just get over it. Get over yourself and do the work that's necessary. And then when I was being informed that I needed to write a book, somebody gave me like a plaque and I was like, wow, I must say this a lot. It was just a person that was in an audience brought it to his speech to give it to me. So Suck It Up Buttercup, my book is about leadership. So it's Suck It Up Buttercup, be a leader people will follow. And I wrote it because and have that strong of a title because I feel like there's a lot of people that would say that and say, oh, suck it up, Buttercup, you're the problem. But when you read the book, someone like me goes, oh, I'm the problem. I need to suck it up and I need to change and stop telling everybody else to change. So my book, that was my first book. It really is about realizing like, hey, just because you're dominant, just because you're direct, just because you get things done, doesn't mean you're winning friends and influencing people. You may actually be doing the opposite with I have a very, very direct personality. And I didn't realize for the long time that, wow, I'm really rubbing people the wrong way because I can do something like this doesn't mean they can. And so I really had to, grab a mirror and look into it and say, whoa, Wendy, you might be part of the problem here. And I'm glad I learned that, at a younger age, because I already, I would say, ruined some business relationships, even as the HR person, of just expecting everyone to be go-getters and figure things out so quickly. So I talk a lot in that book about personality styles and how your personality style might run somebody the wrong way. But more importantly, that it's important for us as humans and definitely as managers to figure out who their people are. What's my style? What's yours? How are we going to work together and not rub each other the wrong way? And then let's just take a pause here so we can see, is this a personality issue, or is this a skill issue or a performance issue or behavior issue? So I talk a lot about that in Personality Styles and Suck It Up Buttercup. And in my other book, which is about dealing with crappy leaders and jerks at work, I do talk a lot about personality traits as well, like extrovert, introvert, and how that makes a difference in roles. I personally believe that there's no right or wrong personality style or personality trait for XYZ role. Do certain people fall, or certain traits or styles fall into certain roles? Absolutely. But I think anybody can do any role they want with the proper training, mentorship, and coaching. So, that's kind of where those books came from. The second book, which, has a much more direct title, and it's The A-Hole Whisperer. It was just something that I wanted to name the first book, and my book coach said, absolutely not. You're not putting that in your first book cover. So I was like, well, then I guess I'm writing two books.
That was the long sleeve one, wasn't it? Can you do a long sleeve in a different color?
Well,
Yeah.
hold on a second.
But I surely
I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Along those same lines and all along that kind of way and everything, one of the things that you talk about is why are so many people quitting their jobs? And I'd love to hear your thoughts around that and why it is so hard to hire people. We were actually having earlier today a economy show that we do regularly here on Pod TV, and they were talking about how things are improving, even though some people are afraid of AI and the impact of AI and all along those lines. But definitely we do know that we saw some silent quitting going on, and we've even seen people that have quit their jobs to go off to exotic places, because I know a couple of people that went to their jobs and maybe even moved to the French Riviera or moved out into the Caribbean or some of the other places. I think I even know somebody that moved out to Bali and everything during this pandemic time and all along those lines. But I'm just wondering, why do you feel as an HR people, so many people are quitting their jobs, and is it hard to hire people, or is it hard to hire quality people? Because that's another thing that I've heard, is that some people are like, I can find plenty of talent, but is it the talent that I want to hire? That's another question.
Yeah. So the thing with the attracting and retention in today's world, it's just very difficult. We don't have enough workers that have the skills that we need. So that's the first thing. So now more than ever, employers need to know that I don't care if you're hiring, an 18-year-old or an 80-year-old or a 40-year-old. It's not so much age, but we need different. Many employers need different skills today. And so regardless of who they're going to hire, they still are going to have to train them. And if they're not willing to do that, or they're not capable of doing that, then first of all, they shouldn't be in business, but we'll let that one go there. Second of all, it's just going to mean they're going to continue having high turnover. I think that, I know actually that most businesses rush into hiring, and they're desperate, and they hire out of desperation. So they don't think through the job description. They don't think through the job ad. They don't think through the interview, and they just go and rush in the interview, and everything's chaotic. The candidates are already like, I don't know if I want to work with that company, because they don't even know how to send out an email with a Zoom link. Never mind, getting me a proper onboarding and training. So often candidates are already turned off just in the interview process because the employer isn't even communicating right, or their job ad. Oh, I hate it when I see these job ads and they're all negative words in the job ad. I'm like, oh gee, I can't wait to work for you.
Well, not only that, but Wendy, one of the things I was thinking about is definitely one of the jobs that I went for and everything, and I've talked about it on this show as well as other shows. I already knew just because of the environment that I did not want the job and everything. So while I went through the process of interviewing for the newspaper that was in Shreveport, Louisiana, and all along those lines, and maybe it's changed because this would have been in the mid to late 80s and everything around that space, I just knew that there was something about that kind of industrial kind of environment that it had, similar to Pittsburgh and some other industrial towns. And I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying that I knew that that wasn't necessarily what appealed to me and everything. So I think it was one of them cases where I went for the job interview, and if they had hired me, it might have been a different answer. And all along those lines, in terms of I probably would have accepted it. And who knows, I might have even grown to like Shreveport or some of the surrounding areas. But I just knew that I breathed a sigh of relief when they sent me the rejection letter, because I was going like, I'm not sure that I wanted to work in that particular environment because of it being not necessarily a area of the country that I was finding appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, getting back to your question about the quiet quitting and why are people leaving, there's two things. Like it's hard to attract people, and then it's even harder to retain them. And so if you want to retain people, why don't you attract the right people and then retain them versus attracting people out of desperation, selling them a bill of goods, telling them you have this amazing culture, and they walk in the door and they're like, you don't even have a culture. And it's a ick factor because there's no consistency here. There's no policies. There's no, training. There's no help. There's no mentoring. There's no coaching. And then, obviously, if you're not paying, you're just not going to get people. If you're thinking you're going to pay at the bottom of the barrel because that's what your budget allows, I'm sorry, your budget's wrong. And that means that you don't know how to run a business. And, again, did I mention that I'm very direct?
No, I like the fact that you're direct. And I had a question for you, and I'm sure you have a direct answer and everything, but I am sometimes shocked at how many companies don't really have a succession plan or even a plan for advancement, and don't really encourage advancement. I've worked with a number of nonprofits, but I've seen it in both the nonprofit and the profit world. So I was just wondering, does that surprise you when you see that a number of companies, including some well-known companies, don't necessarily do a lot of training in order to help get the people to advance? So maybe you are kind of, there's the old movie narrative of the guy that comes in the mail room, learns the system of the mail room and some of the systems of the business, and then goes on to either become a manager or in some cases even an owner of those companies. And we know that that is a Hollywood narrative, even though Pursuit of Happiness and a couple of other ones were actually based on reality and everything. But I don't know that there's enough of that kind of training going on in terms of like maybe the guy comes in the mail room, or the woman comes in or the guy as a chef or something like that, and you are training them to learn new skills that can help them become more attainable and maybe even get a better job either within the company or without the company. But I just wondered, does that shock you when you
No,
see
I mean, my shock factor ended 25 years ago, I think, when I got into HR, but I'm not shocked because when the economy is going really good, and when we had enough workers, remember, a lot of baby boomers have retired and still are retiring, and hence the term baby boomers. There's a giant generation, and as they are retiring, or even partially retiring, we don't have enough humans that have replaced the baby boomers. Good for our earth and not good for our companies, right? So it's one of those things like, oh, well, we'll just replace them. We'll just replace them. And it's like, no, there's no one there to replace. We won't get into too much on politics or anything today because my head will probably explode. But, I say, hey, we have all these people who want to come to the United States to work. Why don't we make it easier for them to immigrate here, but put them to work versus, oh, I'm going to bring an immigrant in. They're going to get a visa, and then the spouse is not, but they're both going to live here, but only one of them can work. And it's like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? Like government, let's get it together here. But no, it doesn't surprise me at all. Most companies are, formed by somebody's passion of a service or a product, and that's great. But those people that have this service or their product that they're creating for for the world, they're not always good business people. And I don't mean that really to slap anybody or anything like that, but it's just the truth. You know, running a business and creating a product or a service are two different things. And you need to have them infrastructure in place. But that's not usually how it works. They go, oh, I'm going to make this cup and I'm going to get people that are passionate about the cup to come work for me. Well, passion only takes you so far. You need, you know, training, you need onboarding, you need money, you need benefits, you need work-life balance, you need a retirement plan, you know, so on and so forth. You need feedback and recognition and all of that. And many startup companies, the founders, they don't know how to do that. And they're strapped financially that they can't get people to come on board to help them do that. The one thing that I do love since I'll just say since the beginning of the pandemic is I do believe that there's a lot more consultants out there that left corporate America, which is another reason why we have a shortage of workers. A lot of people left corporate America and said, I'm going to start my own gig so that I could be in charge of my work-life balance. So the cool thing is that means we have a lot more consultants that are experts at something that can help you. You don't need a full-time employee. You can just get an independent contractor or a consulting firm to help you. So, you know, the entrepreneurs who are using excuses of, oh, I can't afford that, or I can't afford to bring a full-time HR person on, you're running out of excuses because you're just saying, I'm not willing to pay for it. So I'm going to abuse my workers and then they're going to quit and they're going to tell everybody all over the internet. And then I'm sitting here shaking my head going, or scratching my head saying, geez, I wonder why I can't attract or retain anybody.
Well, they can't attract and retain anybody. But one of the other things that you just mentioned that I know I've had a couple of folks, including one that was on the show about a couple of years ago, that he was shocked, even though maybe he shouldn't have been as shocked, because he was a business coach and a person in the technology field. And he actually spent some time, I believe it was in either Kuwait or Qatar or somewhere in the Middle East. But he talked about how a number of his friends, because he definitely does some stuff in the technology space and in the business space, but they would tell him that they had a great business idea. But then, of course, one of the questions he would ask them is, do you have a business plan that I can look at? And all along those lines. And many of the folks didn't have, to your point, a business plan or have any idea of what a business plan was. And part of the reason that Pod TV was formed, formerly IBM TV, is because the two founders were frustrated that we weren't teaching enough around fiscal literacy and around civics and a number of other things that should be taught that aren't taught as much. But I was just wondering your thoughts around that, because I do know a number of business owners that if you ask them even their mission statement, they won't have an idea of what the mission statement is. And if you're asking for a business plan, you might as well be asking them for a version of calculus that they don't understand and everything.
Yeah. No, it is the truth. I try to help anybody who asks. I literally just had a text message right before we started, like 1 minute before we started, of somebody I don't even know that somebody referred to me and said, hey, I'm going to go start my own HR business. I'm like, please call me first. Okay. And I didn't even charge her. I'm like, listen, here are all the things that I screwed up on. And here's the things that I don't want you to screw up on. You know, they don't usually have a plan. They don't have insurance. They don't have, you know, an actual LLC corporation or whatever whatever your type of organization is. And they're not realizing that you have to do all this stuff or you have to pay somebody to do it all, right? So you either have to do it yourself, which means you're not really going to be doing the HR consulting part. You're going to be doing the business part. I did an analysis myself just 2 weeks ago of how much time did I spend last year on non-revenue generating work. And it was 75% of my time was non-revenue generating work. And I was like, something's got to give. So I'm making some changes myself in my business this year. But it is super, super important for anybody who's listening. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, there's so many free resources out there that you can get to help you. There's an organization called SCORE, which I'm sure you've probably heard of,
yes.
Which used to be retired mentors. But they're not necessarily retired anymore. I know that because I was one of them and I'm certainly not retired. But there's so many free or cheap resources out there. Like, ask for help, raise your hand and say, I need help. And don't be embarrassed, because the people that succeed have asked for help. and followed somebody else's advice. But just winging it, being an entrepreneur, I'm not going to say you're going to fail, but you are going to go through some financial hardship.
No, those financial hardships are real, and all along those lines. And along that line, I've got some friends that are in the music and entertainment space, but it's not strictly just the music and entertainment space. I've got a number of other friends that are in different other businesses, whether it's interior design and a number of other things. And they are finding out that they can't get by. It's kind of what you were just alluding to on one income. So a number of them are working in the gig economy, whether that is driving Lyft or Uber, or whether that is doing DoorDash or Grubhub or some of the various other gig economies that are out there. So I was just wondering, what is your thoughts around that? Because I know a number of people, including some that are in the corporate world, get frustrated because some of their employees are trying to work multiple jobs because they have to make ends meet, and sometimes the pay isn't enough, so you might have to go out there and do other jobs, or maybe you haven't had the success that you want if you're in the creative field and you still got to pay those bills and everything. So we did see
Yeah, absolutely.
the
I
pandemic
mean,
of gig work. So your thoughts around
yeah, I would say, do anything you can. If you're passionate about something, know that you're going to need money to make that happen. And so if you have to stay at a corporate job, even if it's like a lower level job, so that you can work, part-time, even full-time, and then do your gig at night or on the weekends, do it. Just go after your dreams, but have a plan. The great thing about, 2024 is we are a gig economy, right? And we're finally there, and it's acceptable. It's acceptable for anybody of any, age, race, gender orientation, you name it, to go drive an Uber or a Lyft. It's not a big deal. It's not an embarrassment, and it should have never been, but it's no problem. I know people that own their businesses and, they're still struggling because it's very expensive world, and also bartenders on the side. When you're bartending or you're doing Uber and you're meeting people that have money and that might need your service. So you're probably you do have to learn to talk about it too. Just say, yeah, I'm doing this on the side because I'm getting my business together. So, go after your dreams, but please put a budget together, put a business plan together, and then make sure that you are doing your best to stick to it, or at least saying, okay, I'm going to give it 4 months at this. And if it doesn't work, then I'm going to switch gears, instead of saying, I'm just going to do this for 4 years and not make any money. No. That's not a business plan. That's a business plan to bankruptcy.
Right, definitely a business plan to bankruptcy and everything. Now, you work in HR, and I know that I've been guilty of it. Other people have been guilty of it as well. But one of the things in the HR world is that a lot of times, and I think it might have even been when it was going on, if I remember the book correctly and everything, and even the movie with Pursuit of Happiness. But I'm just wondering your thoughts around how a number of people use the resources of their employees to advance themselves as well. And I know that sometimes corporations turn a blind eye, but sometimes they realize that that's what's going on, and they don't really say as much as maybe they should and everything. But I was just wondering, as an HR person, is that something that you have observed? Because I know for a fact that there have been times that I have worked and used a copy or even used the phone for outside of a business. And I think that that is a very common practice that goes on and has been going on for decades. I know that it's always not the most ethical thing to do, but a number of people do it, and whether it is or isn't. But I just wanted your take on that, because a lot of people will, borrow an envelope and
Yep.
maybe use it to mail something that is not business related, or use the copier for something that is a side business, or like I said, occasionally use the phone as well, even though that's easier to track. But the envelopes
Yeah.
and the copier is sometimes harder to track. But I just wanted your take on that, because I do know
Oh,
a number
yeah.
of people that have been doing this for decades. Have been entire movies made about it.
Oh, yeah. Here's the deal, and I'm not saying it's right because it is theft, but if the company doesn't want that to happen, then they need to manage that. They need to
Right.
have policies. They need to do training on professionalism, respect, and ethics. They need to make sure that their managers know what the company wants to do, or does the company say, hey, we're cool with you having an extra gig, but we just want to make sure you give it 100% while you're here,
Right.
and don't steal our customers. So many companies in their handbook, they have it's not a non-compete, and that's a whole other thing, but it's more of like, hey, we don't care if you work a second or third job, you just can't use our resources to do it or steal our customers, and then explain what that actually means.
Right.
My concern, more than stealing the paper or a stamp and binder clips here and then, is the time. It's much easier to replace a binder clip or an envelope than it is to replace 4 hours that the employee sat at that desk because you made them come in and they worked on their own business. Is that right? Absolutely not. How do people get away with that? Because nobody's managing them. And that's another reason why, about the, talking into our original conversation about attraction and retention, is people do want to be managed. And if you don't manage them, you don't give them any feedback. You don't give them any recognition. So good feedback, negative feedback, training, recognition. How are things going? We're here to help. Here's a career plan. Here's opportunities that you can work for. Here, we're going to put you on a new project so you meet with new clients that you've never been before.
Yeah.
That's when employees start getting disengaged, because they're like, my company doesn't care about me. So I didn't get a write-up or anything, but I'm not happy here. So I'll just sit here and quiet quitting, which means I'll do my bare minimum of my job, and I'll take my check and then I'll go home.
But Wendy, along those same lines and everything, and you kind of alluded to it, and definitely I've seen it on one of the other jobs that I worked at, which is a testing company, like end of the year type of test and everything. And a lot of the testing is done through the computer and all along those lines. But it is sometimes hard, particularly on the internet jobs, to monitor the jobs and to monitor the productivity of the people and all along those lines. For example, I'm very quick and efficient in what I do and everything, and I know that there are others that are as efficient and as quick as I am, and they have definitely even told me that after a while I might be listening to the tape and multitasking, listening to the tape and also having the TV in the background, or listening to the tape and also doing house cleaning or something else that needs to be done as well. So I was just wondering, from an HR perspective, is that become more of an issue as we have gone more into this internet kind of space? Definitely during the pandemic, I think there were even school kids that might have been doing their schoolwork and at the same time playing a game of one of those video games. I was trying to think of one like Call of Duty. So that's one that popped into my head and everything along those lines. So I just wanted your take on that, because as we have become more of a computerized society, I do know that there are people that are working from home, but they might not be as dedicated to working from home as they would have been if they were working in the office and actually having the manager look over the shoulder and making sure that they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. But I just wanted your take on that as a HR individual, because I did see a number of people and had conversations with a number of people that were like, yeah, I'm only doing this for a while. Like, if I've got to listen to a tape, it's going to take me 2 hours to do it, and they gave me a 5-hour time frame, I might put it back on rewind and be doing the dishes while I'm listening to it for the second time.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, there's going to always be people that are going to take advantage of the situation. Again, this comes back to having well-trained managers that know how to manage, whether it's remote or in person.
Right.
I'm in the school of thought that people have been taking advantage of their managers, or lack of managers, I should say, lack of management skills forever. Even just because somebody's sitting at their desk doesn't mean they're actually doing their work. They're just physically there, breathing the same space as you. And also, if a manager says, hey, this should take 2 hours to do, but it takes this employee 4 hours, but they never tell that employee, no, I need you to do that in 2 hours. Whose fault is that? Is the really smart employee who's taken advantage of it, or the manager who isn't managing? And so there's so much to unpack here, but I do believe people have been taking advantage of their employers for a very long time. Is it easier in a remote world? Possibly. It could possibly be easier. Many companies have all these tools where you check in and they could tell when you're online and what you're working on and everything. That's not exactly affordable for small businesses, all those savvy tools. So the biggest thing that I would say is whoever's doing the managing, whether it's the entrepreneur, the business owner, or you have managers on the team, get them managed to the way you want this company culture to be. So they have to get trained to say, we want you to be a hands-on manager, or we don't want you to be a hands-on manager. We want you to sit with each one of your employees on a weekly basis to do a mini review type thing, or we don't. We want to do that every month. We want to know exactly where everybody is in a project timeline. Which means you might need to actually have a project plan, kind of going back to the business plan as well. And so a lot of this is all about management. Now, for the entrepreneurs that are listening, please don't blame your managers, okay? Because the managers are they're a mirror of you. And if you didn't set your expectations with managers and train them, then how the heck are they going to know what to do? I just see so many people doing the finger pointing of the employees are taking advantage of us. The managers are taking advantage of us. It's like, grab a mirror. You're part of the problem because you're the common connection here. So suck it up, Buttercup, and be a leader people will follow willingly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, everything. But there's another tool that a lot of people are using, and I know that you wrote some material around this and everything, and it can be a great management tool, but I don't know that everybody that's using it, including the managers, know how effective it can be, and sometimes there is some concern that it might not be as effective as people think it can be. But I did see that you had written some articles about ChatGPT being used even by HR. So I just wondering, how effective a tool is that for HR, and are enough HR people using ChatGPT, and are you concerned that it might take your job, just like there are people that are concerned that it might take other jobs as well, including those of our restaurant workers? But I just wondering your thoughts around this powerful tool.
I ChatGPT, you want my job, take it, man. I have at it, good luck with it. I do a lot of training. I train HR people, managers, ops people, how to use ChatGPT to help them not lose their sanity. But ChatGPT it's like the new internet. I don't really know how else to explain it. Like, it's not going to take an HR person's job. I was just doing a 2-hour training the other day to HR people on ChatGPT. And I was like, what do you want to know? Let's do live searches. And depending on how you ask the question, the prompt in ChatGPT is depending on what the results is. Yeah. And some of the information that was coming out, as an HR expert, I could look over and I said, wait, they're missing a law on this. So you're still going to need an HR person, somebody who's savvy with laws, policies, culture, lawsuits and court cases. ChatGPT is outdated currently. And so if a law change, just got approved yesterday, it's not going to be on ChatGPT. You might be able to get it on the paid version that is connected to the live internet. But I really don't think ChatGPT is going to take anybody's job. Is it going to assist them? Absolutely. We have a major shortage of workers in the United States, and we have a major shortage of workers in HR. So if any assistance that possible, ChatGPT can help you. It could be that assistant that you've been looking for 3 years and you haven't been able to fill the seat. So it could kind of help you a little bit. But I personally don't think it's going to take most people's jobs. I think it's going to help streamline things and gather information. I myself have written so many things using ChatGPT: presentations, articles, podcast interviews, policies, you name it, offer letters, songs. It helped me plan a trip to Paris after I did 4 hours worth of research, and then I did a 2-minute ChatGPT search, and it came up with a better travel itinerary than I did.
Wow, that's amazing and everything. One of the things that people talk about, including even some of the people that are in education and in government and a number of other things, is this notion that our youngsters and people in general are lazy. And I don't necessarily see that. I see a lot of very productive workers that are doing a lot of work, and definitely sometimes not even getting the credit for the work that they are doing as well. So I just wanted your thought around this notion that we have become lazier as a society, not just here in the United States, but around the world as well. Because I see a lot of innovative thoughts that are going on, including some innovative things that are going on in the notion of computers and the notion of various fields, including gaming and a number of other things. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with those that think that the world has gotten lazy, but I was just wondering your thoughts.
I'm on the same thought as you. Are there lazy people? Yes. Have there always been lazy people? Absolutely. So the interesting thing is, we our government, I guess, or society moved us as human beings, specifically in the United States. We moved us from hands-on manufacturing. Oh, you got to go to college, you got to work in a corporate job, and we all complied, right? We all got college loans that'll be with us till we die because we were told to go to college. So I went 3 times. I'm like, oh my goodness, I wish somebody stopped me because it's not the end all be all. But we told everybody to go to college and get an education so that they could work in the office and be, a professional. Well, guess what? Now we don't have anybody to do manufacturing. And then they wonder why we're relying on other countries. So that's the first thing. Well, I'm not saying corporate or professional people are lazy, but it is different. It's not a physical job, where manufacturing, construction, things like that, even healthcare is very physical. But we used to have people working 80, 90, 100 hours a week, including farming and in the fields. And then we got down to 40 hours a week. Then we had this thing called the pandemic that everybody said, heck with this. I am not giving everything I got to this company, that company, or any company and sacrificing my life, my mental health, my wellness, my family just to make, $2,000 more because we're not getting paid that much. So I think a lot of things have accumulated that we're at in 2024 that most people are saying, no more. I need to take my life back. And I will give you everything I got when I'm at work, but don't call me after work. Don't have me come in on the weekends. Don't think I'm working 60 hours. I am one of those people. This is my main focus this year. I'm a workaholic. And my main focus this year is to pull in my workload, even though I'm so passionate about what I do that I can't help myself to give people advice and everything. I'm like, no, pull it back, lady, because you got to take care of your own mental health. And I don't know, maybe exercise.
No, that whole thing of taking care of our mental health and all along those lines. But you were saying that, I was thinking how much of the history of America also plays into what we are into now. Because I don't know, no matter what your view is, and I know Nikki Haley has certain views about it, whether it was economical or just strictly about slavery. I actually think it was a combination of a variety of factors when we look at slavery. But I don't know that we as a nation ever got away from the plantation mentality, because I briefly worked, and this was in the late 80s, at GlaxoSmithKline. At that time it was Glaxo, and I did see a division of who was working in which jobs. It was majority women that were working in the maintenance field, and all along those lines. I think that was a FDS contract, if I remember correctly, the name of the agency and everything. And ARA, which was the catering, was a lot of definitely both minorities of Hispanic and African American, and a lot of women there as well. And definitely in the secretarial pool, where we know that it was a lot of elite white males that were in the corporate jobs and in terms of executives. And I'm not saying that that's strictly the case, because there are people that break the glass ceiling and get through the glass ceiling. But I do think that a lot of times we as a nation train our kids to go to work for somebody else, not necessarily to work the entrepreneurial space and all along those lines. And we've been comfortably doing that, I would argue, at least as long as I've been here on the planet. And I was born in 1962 and everything. So, and it was probably going back to my grandparents and parents' age, which would have been like the 40s and the 20s, if not beyond. But I'm just wondering your take on that, whether we have ever got past that plantation mentality in the work world.
I mean, I think the millennials and Gen Z are getting us past that for sure. But it's a long road, because as we started saying in the beginning of this podcast, is that it's hard to be a business owner. You don't have the support. We don't even have national health care. So most people only work for company. Not most people. A lot of people only work at a corporate job to get their health insurance.
Right.
I mean, that's awful. That's awful. But I do think politics plays a part in that too, because politicians make money off of healthcare. We know it. Let's just be honest here. And so they're like, okay, well, we're not going to make it easy for the entrepreneurs to get healthcare insurance, affordable healthcare insurance. You have to go work for these companies, which, by the way, are in the politicians' books, or, in their pockets and everything. So it's a crapshoot is what it is. I do think, though, the youngest generations are going trying to, as always, the youngest generation of any generation changes the world. And then we talk about them. You're crazy, you know, but then it just becomes normal. Baby boomers change things. Gen X change things. Millennials change things. Gen Z is going to change things. Then we all complain about them. And I just tell the next generation, don't worry, we're going to complain about somebody else new. Don't, just keep doing what you're doing. But we do. Our country is set up to make the rich richer and make the poor reliant on the rich. And we barely even have a middle class anymore. And so it is very disheartening. But for our listeners, don't give up. You know, you can do it. Just ask for help. There's a lot of resources out there, a lot of free resources or low cost resources, but you have to have, as Mark said, you have to have a business plan in order to go forward. And this includes everything about your employees. I don't care if you have 1 employee or 100 employees, you need to have a well thought out plan about how am I going to attract them and how am I going to retain them? How am I going to manage them so that my company's making money, so they're happy and they come back Monday morning. And so they're not sitting there doing another job while they're working for me.
And speaking of a well thought out plan and everything, I know many corporations, we've even had some here in North Carolina, like SAS and Cree and a number of other folks, that their plan to make themselves get better employees and to retain those good employees is to, you know, give them some better tea, some better coffee, maybe a party that features the different staff members bringing their favorite dish, or maybe going out and getting some pizza or chicken wings and all along those lines. And of course, there are a number of companies that have these great wellness programs that are making sure that work-life balance is going on, because there are even some that will have you be able to bring your kid to a daycare on campus and have all these various exercise programs and things that they are doing to make you want to stay in those corporations and in those companies. And I just wondering, from your point of view as an HR person, are these kind of programs good for companies, and should more companies be doing them, or are they just a waste of money in a sense and a feel-good move as well by the corporations? Because I do know that there are a number of companies here that do a lot of those wellness programs, and they definitely have those free meal kind of things as well that might try to perk up the people's personnel and their morale. That's where I was looking for.
Oh, I mean, everything has to be unique for every company, and anything you can do to make your employees like working there is a plus. But here's the thing. I don't want you to just like working there. I want you to be productive. Right. So that's where the management comes in. But yeah, mental health care, wellness, allowing people to take breaks, free coffee, you name it, whatever you can do. It not only will it help the employee and their mental health and their desire to stay with you, if you have health insurance and they're on it, you know, and you're giving proper treats, so to speak, or you know, healthy things on site, then it's going to keep your costs low for your health insurance claims too. So that's the reason it actually started. It didn't start because, oh, I like my employees and I care about them so much. They said, oh yeah, this health insurance is so expensive. How do we reduce the claims? And finally came up with the fact of, okay, we need to come up with other things that the employees can do and get into wellness programs, for example, exercise plans, competitions. I was reading something yesterday. It was yesterday or this morning. I don't even remember, you know, what day it is. It's Monday, but I was reading something in the last 24 hours about that somebody posted on LinkedIn of, oh, it's not your culture that matters. It's the, the manager's culture. And it's, I don't want free coffee, or I don't want, training or whatever it is. And I'm like, listen, all of these come in together. It's like a giant bag. You know, what you want, Mark, and what I want are probably two different things based on who we are as individuals. So if you're just saying everyone's going to get this benefit, well, it's not a benefit to me, then I don't see it. And if you keep shoving it in my face and it's daycare and I don't have kids, you're not helping me out. So how about you give me that equivalent benefit in cash so I could use it for cat care or whatever it is, you know what I mean?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And even with the coffee, I know that one of the things that has existed in some of the companies that I have worked for and everything is that if you're going to give coffee, make sure that it's good coffee. Because I can't tell you how many times people complain about the coffee going like, this is some very bad coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I do have friends that are coffee drinkers, and sometimes they are very complaining because they're going like, nah, this is nothing like the kind of coffee that I would be drinking or the kind of coffee that I would want. So maybe you got to, if you're going to make sure that you're giving them free coffee, you might want to make sure that it is coffee that the folks want to drink and not some watered down version
Yeah,
that
and
is
then
not something that they want to get in the first place.
exactly. And tea too. How about give them some tea too? So there's something different. But,
Right.
this is why it's important to have an HR person on your team or at least an HR consultant, whether you're just starting out, you've been around for 10 years, because the world changes and it's changing at a rapid pace. And so what employees want and need have changed a lot over the past just couple years alone. It's not, and I was focusing on healthcare, for example, but not everybody needs healthcare. They might have it from another source. They might have it from a family member. They might have it from, being a veteran. They might have it from, the government, whatever it might be. So don't, for the listeners today, don't get so caught up like, oh, I can't afford health insurance, because your employee base may not even want it or need it. They might get it completely free from the government. So, you have to survey your employees and say, hey, what's going well here? What's not? What can we change? Be careful with surveys, because we often write surveys and they're biased, and they're not valid and they're not reliable. And we're writing the question in the way we want it to be answered. And then the other thing I say with surveys is, if you don't plan on following or reading the results and doing something about it, don't even ask your employees, because they're going to be so mad that you made me take the time to do this survey to give you feedback of what's going well here and what's not. And then you never even read it, or you read it and you didn't do anything. They'll never do a survey again for you. And then that's when they start saying, and when somebody asks, hey, how's the company culture? And they're like, man, 2 thumbs down. Company culture is bad. You're all talk. You're all, all for show. And that's all there is to it. So today's employees are not, they're not taking garbage. I'm trying to say this in the nicest way possible, but they're not going to, they're not taking BS. They're going to call you out on it because they could find a job somewhere else.
And speaking of not taking BS and everything, how important is it for you, or do you even pay attention to those Glassdoor recommendations? Because I oftentimes will see that people will pan the heck out of their companies in Glassdoor, and then I've also seen some people that are very praising of their Glassdoor recommendations, and then there are some people I think that live by that, just like there's some people in the food world that live by those Yelp recommendations and all along those lines. But I just wondering, as an AR person, how much do you pay attention to those recommendations, whether it's off of Glassdoor or off of LinkedIn?
Well, I can tell you, candidates pay attention to them. So HR and business owners better pay attention to them, because you're not going to get people that are regularly satisfied to go and do a review on Glassdoor or Indeed, or there's so many of those websites, by the way. And often many of them are hidden, that only candidates can get them, not employers. So somebody at the company is going to have to, pretend to be a candidate so they can go on there and read them and write them. But you should be paying attention to them. Even if it's a crappy employee that wrote it and, they left, it's still there and nobody knows the story. So if you're able to addressed it, make sure you're doing it professionally and respectfully. Thank you for the feedback. We've made some changes based on this feedback. Please interview with us again, or please come back. We would love to talk to you. So it's getting rid of our temper tantrum and answering it professionally. Whoever has access to these, Indeed, for example, it needs to be somebody who also has a sales hat on that says, these are our sales for our candidates. And if we can't even get them to apply to the ad because of this negative post, then we need to figure something out. So I 100% know that candidates read those and make decisions based on that. Now, they might also say, I'll still work with the company, but I could see it's a crappy company, so I'm not going to give it my all. But if they hire me, I'll come in and then I'll do my side gig on the side or during company time that I'm already getting paid for by this company.
That makes a lot of sense and everything. By the way, I meant to ask you this at the beginning and everything, and we still got a few more minutes to go. How did you personally end up in HR, and what got you so passionate about this field? Because you're definitely very passionate about it. And did you always know that you were going to be an HR person? Were you the one that was arranging events and arranging kind of job responsibilities even when you were a kid? Because we know that there can even be some HR trends that can be used in grade school as well. So I was wondering, did you develop some of these gifts in grade school? Maybe
No.
always delegating some of the responsibilities.
Absolutely not. As a kid, I wanted to be a veterinarian, and then I had to dissect a fetal pig in like junior in high school, and I was like, "Ah, I can't do this, no way." I was bawling my eyes out the whole time. So then I switched gears and I got 2 degrees in healthcare administration. But then when I actually got into healthcare administration, it just moved too slow for me. It was not on my personality style or trait. I was like, this is slower than molasses and I cannot affect change and therefore I can't work here. Ironically, a lot of things I do now are healthcare related and I have healthcare clients because, benefits end up falling into healthcare. So I was a store manager at CVS when I was in grad school, and then I moved to Florida on a whim from northeastern Pennsylvania. Had a resume in my hand in an elevator, and that's when you had the paper resumes. And a woman got in and said, "Hey, what do you want to do? Can you do HR? I have a client who's looking for that." It was a recruiter, and that's how I ended up in HR.
Wow. Just stumbled across the job. That's
Yeah, I
amazing.
literally stopped. I mean, I already did management and store management, so I already had to deal with a lot of employee stuff. But yeah, I pretty much fell into it. Then I went back to school again and got another master's degree in human resources and a ton of certifications and licenses, blah, blah, blah. But, I like to fix things. I like to find the things that are broke and fix them. And then I like to train people how to fix them on their own. So you don't always have to come back to HR or to me. So I'm one of those HR consultants that I want you to go away. Like, I don't want you to be my client for a very long time because I feel like then I'm not doing the job. But I do focus on training them how to do it versus doing it for them. So yeah, I just kind of ended up there. And the company that I was with for a very long time, I was the first HR person. We didn't have titles, and I just kind of, I think, jokingly got named the HR lady. And so when I started my company, the HR lady, I was like, all right, I'm going to be the HR lady. And I do have 2 trademarks on that. And my website's thehrlady.com.
Along those same lines, everything. What is something that you learned? Because actually, across the street from the Cultural Arts Center I work at, I think it's either a Walgreens or a CVS, but it's one of those. What are some of the things that you learned from that kind of story background that you bring into your life even now?
Wow. In a store like that, or any store, depending on where you're located, zip code wise, you just get all walks of life, and you get all ages, and you have to be empathetic, even when the customer is a real jerk. I'm the kind of person like, hey, if you're abusive, get out of my store, and I'm calling the police. You're not coming back here. But you learn to put that empathy hat on and put yourself in that person's shoes, because they're probably ill, which is why they're coming there, or they need something, and there's a crying child and all of that. And so it's about training people and the employees about empathy, and it is so needed in today's world. So needed. I am thankful that the younger generations seem to have a heck of a lot more empathy than our older generations in the United States, probably in the world, but I'll just say in the United States. And that is something that a lot of business owners and business managers are not prepared for, because the old school mentality is do as I say, not as I do. And today, employees won't stand for that. They'll be like, nope, this is what you said on your website, your mission, vision, and values are, and this is not what you're doing over here. You said you were going to train me. You haven't trained me yet. And so it is definitely a much more difficult world to be a manager and to be HR. I will have to tell you that a lot of HR people exited the workforce during the pandemic because there was so much that they're like, I did not sign up for all of this. And I personally know people that were close to retirement and said, dupe, I'm doing it now. I'm out because I am not dealing with this craziness and laying people off, and then now can't find people. And, it takes, the old rule of thumb used to be like 1 HR person per every 100 employees. And I don't even think there is a valid and reliable, factual, new analysis, because it depends. Everything depends. Where are you? What kind of environment you are? Do you have fancy technology, then you don't need as many people in HR. Do you not? Then you're going to need more. Are your managers trained? Okay, well then they're doing some of the HR responsibilities. But the managers now you need 2 managers now where you used to need 1, because we need to be giving all of our employees more and more and more feedback and recognition and communication and conversations, where before maybe a manager would see their employee once a week. Now it needs to be several times a day. So it is a strange world out there. And all I could say is, let's not hope and pray. Let's actually act and do something to affect the lives of our employees, our customers, and then our business as well.
And there's an old saying, you kind of alluded to it earlier and everything, but I've heard that there are some people that have pushback against that as well. So what do you say to those people that say that the customer is always right? Because I know that that is a idiom that is out there, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with it, because I know there can be times that the customer can be wrong in my mind. But I just wanted your take on that, because that's something that they teach many business owners, is that don't argue with the customer because the customer is always right, or something along those lines. But I don't know that I necessarily buy that idiom, but I was wondering your take on
I
that.
definitely don't buy it. That's for sure. So I think our world is different, and I think most businesses now realize that they cannot go on that saying the customer is always right, because it's, no matter what it is, and even if it's $1 million product, if your employees quit because of that customer, you still can't give that customer that $1 million product, because there's nobody there to make it. So, customers, I think, are becoming to realize now that I'm not going to be right. And if I treat people like crap, then I'm not going to be able to, shop at that place or use that service or product. So I think it's a good thing that we're saying, no, we have to be humane to each other, and we have to be nice to each other. Do I have to like you to work with you? No. Do you have to be respectful to my team? Yes. Or get out of my door right now. I wish more people would say it professionally and respectfully, of course. Now I do think, and I don't think so much this is an age-based thing, but I do think many employees have leaned a little bit too far into that, of saying, I need everything and I need everybody to bend over backwards for me and be nice to me and be empathetic. Like, listen, you wake up on the wrong side of the bed sometimes, and you're rude to somebody. That doesn't mean you discriminated or harassed them or were biased against them. So there are some people that went a little too far, and then there's other people that still are way over here and need to come to the middle, that say, all right, can we just get along as humans, and as a customer not be a jerk, and as an employee realize that people are going to have their bad days? I hope we can get there.
I hope so as well. What do you think is one of the biggest mistakes, you probably alluded to some of them during this conversation, that HR makes in general and everything? So what are some of the big mistakes, whether it is a small company HR or a big corporation HR, that you are sometimes surprised that they are still making those mistakes well into the year, at the beginning of the year 2024?
Number one thing is assuming that they know everything. There's no possible way. I have been doing HR for longer than I care to admit. And every day I learn something new. I literally learned something new this morning trying to help a client on a very, very, very specific ADA issue. And I'm not a disability expert. I've become very, very savvy and experienced in it, especially since the pandemic. But it's really, I think the number one thing is asking for help, going outside of your comfort zone and asking for help. I do think that since the pandemic, a lot of HR people have realized, I have to ask for help or I'm not going to get through this, because your regular 8-hour workday before the pandemic now will be a 12-hour workday, or it's going to take you, you're going to work 8 hours and get half the amount done, because you have so many things that you have to, accomplish, and including attracting and retaining employees. The other thing that I would say is about recruiting is, listen, an HR person isn't necessarily a recruiter. Recruiting is part HR, part sales. And an HR generalist may not have the sales side, so they shouldn't be the recruiter. We always throw people HR like, oh, you take care of benefits, you take care of recruiting, you take care of this. There's no way one person can be an expert on everything. I mean, I'm knowledgeable at a lot, but I know, nope, that goes over there, that goes over there to the safety department. I'm not an expert on that. So asking for help and knowing where your limitations are, and then speaking up to the owners to say, I need help, and the managers need help too. So the managers in HR really should be in alignment, and they're not always. Managers are blaming HR, and HR is blaming the managers.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going back and forth and everything. I've had some friends of mine that have been going to different stores, sometimes because of their jobs and just because of, in generality, general business that they had to do, whether it was going to pick up some item that they needed for their house, like maybe some hardware, or going to go to their doctor's office, and all along those lines. And I know that at least last year, I had a very dear friend that talked about how there seemed to be an uptick in rudeness and the folks not showing respect and a lack of professionalism and all along those lines. But I just wondering, is that something that you have seen, and are we going to see a turn back to maybe a more civil society? Because I definitely didn't know that even in drive-throughs and other places, sometimes people are not as disciplined or trained as much as they should be in professionalism and showing respect. But I just wanted your take on that, because I've heard it not from one friend, but from several friends, where they've had encounters where they felt like they were being disrespected more than they used to be at some of their encounters with people in the service industries, and even some of the professional industries like the policemen and the firemen and everything. But I just wanted your take on this, and whether this is a trend that we will hopefully get away from, but it does seem to be a troubling trend right now.
Yeah, it is definitely a troubling trend. Are we going to get away from it? It depends. It's going to take a while, because it's all related to worker shortage, so, people, whether it's a firefighter, whether it's McDonald's, whether it's a Fortune 500 company, they're hiring out of desperation to fill that seat. And they're rushing, based on my experience, they're rushing through that process like we talked about, but they're also rushing through the onboarding. They're like, here's some paperwork, you're onboarded. It's like, no, that's just paperwork, dude. We still need 2, 3, 4 weeks of training and mentoring and coaching and feedback. And if you don't set the expectations in the job interview, and then day one in training, and a trained manager holding the employees accountable for their attitude, then who's stopping these people from having an attitude, right? And they're hiring them and keeping them because they're desperate, and desperation is not going to pay your bills. What's going to happen is, you have somebody at that drive-through, or at, serving your drink, or again, even a professional career, you have somebody sitting in that seat, but you're pissing off all these customers. So now you're not going to have any customers to actually service, because you hired the wrong person, or you hired a person that has never been in a position that requires professionalism. So they don't know what it means, and you failed to train them. So it's all about slowing down, hiring the right person, realizing when you hire somebody, I'm going to need to get them training, and then doing it, instead of saying, oh yeah, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, and then it never happens. I wonder why this person is real crappy. I don't know, because you hired them and never trained them.
Never trained them in the first place and everything. Now, you mentioned that you got the job with the lady in the elevator and all along those lines. So how long did it take you to actually get to be as good as you are in HR, and what kind of mentorships helped you get to the place that you are now? Because I'm imagining that since you came into the field with certain experiences, but not experiences in HR, it was probably a quick turnaround for you to learn some of the best practices, as well as just learn the field in general. So how long do you think it took you to get from that initial hiring to feeling comfortable in the job that you are doing so many great talks about, and have even been featured on some major networks on as well? So how long did it take you to get from there to here?
25 years. Honestly, though, I would say 8 years, probably, to be quite honest. Now, during that time period, I was fortunate to have really great, not mentors in HR, but mentors in leaders. So the people that I worked for at the time happened to be four guys that had very diverse personalities, and we're willing to stop and coach and mentor people like, hey, this is how we want it to go in this organization. I did a lot of training, a lot of local associations, and then I also went back to get my master's in human resources at that time too. So it all kind of went through. But I do have to say, I credit the owners and the managers and the directors of that company of having patience with me and other people too there, and teaching us what it meant and how you can be successful, of slowing down and giving you a chance to make mistakes. So that's the other thing too, is listen, we often throw people out, say, oh, they made a mistake, or we see this with adults with their children now too, is like, oh, I don't want you to make a mistake, let me stop you, and so that I can help you get through this, or I'll do it for you. Well, guess what, Mark? We learned by royally screwing up. Mm-hmm. So let your employees screw up to a degree, obviously nothing life-threatening, right? But once they make a mistake and have to redo it, and you're helping them through that mistake, what do you say? I don't want to make that mistake again, but you suffered through the mistake. So it's important to make mistakes within reason and learn from them, and then somebody to be there to coach you through it, to say, this is how we're going to do it moving forward, instead of just saying, don't do it that way, do it this way. Well, if you're telling me how to do it all the time, this goes for having with children too, how am I going to learn how to figure this out on my own? So to answer your original question, I would say about 8 years, but honestly, I really meant it when I said 25 years, because I just learned something new this morning. And so it's always, especially in HR land, it's always something new laws, new pandemics, new, political things, everything that comes into the workplace is ongoing. And so if you're thinking about going into HR and you're not the type of person who loves ongoing education, don't go into HR.
And HR has so many interesting components, because I know that even with the testing company that I worked with and everything, we had to sign agreements that we would not do sexual discrimination or sexual harassment. I think there was a time we were doing that almost annually, and it might still be going on, that is done regularly. Definitely new employees have to sign that and everything. And I know that ironically, there are a number of conversations that take place even in the work environment that some people would say are inappropriate, because they are the things that you're not supposed to talk about. I know a lot of people will say, don't bring up even in relationships, religion, politics, or sometimes even sports, because people are very adamant about their views around those topics and everything. But I have seen some jobs that those conversations are permitted, and they don't seem to have as much a problem and everything. But I just wanted your take around that, and do enough companies pay attention to those issues, and both in terms of the sex discrimination and those sex discrimination laws. And secondly, are there certain topics that from an HR perspective, corporations should not be allowing those conversations? Because I know that there are some of you that have robust opinions around politics and even religion, and sometimes they even have to make HR decisions. Because I had a friend that was Muslim, and I remember that they definitely let him have his moment of prayer and everything, because they knew that he was of that faith and he was actually in leadership. So I think they let him go off and do his noon prayer. I think it was around noon, if I remember correctly. It might have been.
Yeah, and so that's the law actually regarding religion. So we'll go back a little bit here. Long time ago, I used to be of the mindset, nope, nobody talk about that, because we're just going to end up causing fights. And now I'm of the mindset of like, how about we have some structure around this? How about we train our employees and our managers, again, what it means to be respectful in the workplace. So when companies call me and say, hey, we need to do our, annual sexual harassment training, I say, no, we're going to do a respect training. So we're going to do, yes, it's going to have sexual harassment, but it's going to have all kinds of harassment, gender orientation, sexual orientation, race, religion, you name it. Let's have a training about everything, about diversity and inclusivity and how to be respectful in our organization, what our mission, vision, and values are, so that employee, this is how you are to act in this organization. And if you don't, here are the repercussions, or here are the consequences. So it's going to be look different for every organization. I think as long as they're having respectful conversations about politics, sports, religion, whatever, then it's okay. The minute it gets out of line, then those individuals who are out of line need to be held accountable, and they need to know that it's coming too. So it's not a surprise. Need to be consistent. Because if this favorite person over here who sells $1 million a year gets away with talking about this stuff in a negative manner, but this person over here does not, you're going to get yourself sued for sure for not being consistent. And so it's important, again, to train people and then have it in your policies and have your handbooks updated every year and make sure everybody signs the handbook to say, I understand what I am expected to do in this organization and what I can and cannot talk about. I wanted to briefly mention the thing just about religion, because it says everybody always groups religion and politics together. If you're a private organization, you can ban politics from being spoken in the workplace. So as long as you're not a public organization, there's different laws there, and we won't get into that now. But regardless of what kind of organization you are in the United States, people have the right to their own religious beliefs. They don't have a right to be talking negatively about a different religion, and they don't have the right to force their religious beliefs off of somebody else. But if their religious belief is that I pray or do something at noon every day, then you have to accommodate. You have to pay them for it. It depends. All of this depends if they're salary, hourly, depends what you do for other people, so this is where it's important to have an HR expert involved to say, what am I allowed to do? What can I say yes to? What can I say no to as a company? Because if you're being respectful to everybody, then everybody will learn that it's okay to be different and diverse here, but we all have a job to do. So even though I'm taking a 5-10 minute break over here to do something related to my religion, I still got to get my work done. It's not an excuse to not work. I still got to get it done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As you were saying, I was actually thinking about something that could be taken wrong or taken in a certain way, but I'm sure that there are some people that we're hearing you going like, yeah, that's the established religions and everything, but maybe today I'm going to set up the religion of pen, or the religion like writing pens, or the religion of salt, and based on what you just said, I could actually have the corporation would have to abide by it if I can prove that it is a said religion and everything, because we do know that there are new religions created, it seems like almost regularly, all along those lines. But even with
it's called sincerely held religious belief. So there is a big to do about the flying spaghetti monster religion, Pastafarianism, and that was thrown out in court. Yeah. So the good news is, if people are just making up religions just to get away with something or get some accommodation, it's probably not going to fly. But it does not need to be a major religion. It just needs to be a sincerely held religious belief. And that is hard to prove. My suggestion for anybody is to, again, get an employment attorney in your state or states if you do have something like that coming up, because there are state laws that may override federal laws, so to speak, or go above and beyond. But generally, it has to be a sincerely held belief. And I would shy away from forcing them to prove that they had a sincerely held belief. This came up a lot during the pandemic and vaccines and vaccine mandates. And so it's been a nightmare past couple years for HR people. That's all I gotta say.
It's been a nightmare for y'all, definitely with the HR, because I actually have some friends that were very much anti-vaccine, and I do know that they had at least one friend in California, some very interesting conversations with their HR department, because they were very passionate about the reasons, and some of it was personal, had to do with family members that they lost during the pandemic. So you really couldn't argue that they didn't have a legitimate concern. And I know there was some back and forth between them and their HR out there in California. But one of the other things you said that I was going to get to and everything is because you mentioned consistency, and that's something that I wish more HR people would have, because I do know some people that are, even when it comes to sexual harassment, have been known to speak kind of out of school or to say things that might be suggestive, and got away with it for years, if not decades. But then they might say it to the wrong person, or the person that might be a little bit connected too closely to the hierarchy and everything, and then were eventually gotten rid of because of that rule and everything. And I know that that's happened at least in a couple of corporations that I've worked with, and then people are scratching their head because they're going like, everybody knew that homeboy or a homegirl had that kind of belief system and attitude and everything. But you got to be careful who you speak to, because not everybody
Yeah.
that you speak to and that you are joking with is going to have the same reaction. Because I think he might have said it the last time to somebody that was tied to the corporation itself. So that was the kind of the death knell to him, having done it for years and everything. But like I said, he got away with it for decades, and then he turned around and said it to the wrong person, and that's when they let him go and everything. But I just remember a conversation I had with coworkers who everybody was like, but homeboy, and we won't say names, was known for that for years and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do hope like the new school HR, 2024 and beyond. And I have seen a lot of change in I would just say the past, like, I don't know, 8 to 10 years, where HR is now taken seriously by, companies, where before it was a pen pusher and
Right.
payroll. I'm on the belief that payroll has no business in HR. That's an accounting function. But the new school HR, I'm hoping that they're like, no, company, this is the right thing to do. And if you don't want to do it, then I won't work here. Now, right now, HR is kind of, if you're an HR person, you kind of, not that you could, write your ticket, but many companies are looking for HR people. So I think right now, like, it's a good time to give the ultimatum to a company to say, you either act like this and be consistent and talk to that person over there who's been doing this for years and everybody knows, or I'm not going to be here. And they might say, fine, we're going to find somebody else. Well, good luck, because the people that are looking for new HR jobs they're leaving another crappy company. So they're not going to come to yours.
They're going to leave your crappy company. I mean, leave the other crappy company to come to your crappy company. That is very much true. I know we got about another 10, 15 minutes and get ready to wrap up and everything, because I knew you had a certain limitation time-wise and everything. And I've actually got ready to go to my other job, speaking of jobs and all on those lines. But there was a couple of questions that I was going to get to that I definitely still want to get to in this time that we've got and everything. And one of them you alluded to at the beginning, and I said that I would bring it up, and that's that whole notion of work-life balance, because I know a lot of people are sitting there trying to figure that one out and everything, and how to have that work-life balance. You did mention there was a time in your life that you had the significant other, and I didn't care whether there were young people created from that or not. But how did you then, and how do you now manage that work-life balance?
Yeah. So when I was married, I had a stepdaughter. And so, we wanted to make sure that we were, at games and everything. And I just put it on my calendar. And even then I was an HR consultant, so I was in charge of my calendar. But let's face it, your clients are really in charge of it. But I just put my foot down. And even just about 2.5 years ago, I made major changes as well. I moved from Central Florida to the coast. So I live by the beach now, and I have a life now that I didn't have during COVID. And I was like, no, I'm not working on the weekends anymore. Once in a while, but I'm like, not doing it. Nope, I'm not working at night. Sorry. So sure, was I still working 60, 70 hours? Yeah, but I was doing it Monday to Friday. Last year, I did a little bit better. And this year I'm like, no, that's it. I'm not doing it, because making 10, 20, 30, even $50,000 extra is still not going to cover my health. So for me, I live by my calendar. So I put stuff on my calendar, and that's what I do. And when it's 5:00 or whatever, my day's over, I'm done. That's it. I'm moving things to the calendar tomorrow. Other people use project planning, project management tools, whiteboards, or whatever it is. But you have to learn to say no. And I'm still struggling with this, Mark. I'm not going to lie. I've been doing this consulting for many, 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 many years. And again, I just want to help people. So I still struggle with it. But you just have to get an accountability partner. Whether it's a spouse, whether it's a friend, whether it's another business owner, and you're all checking in. I have some friends that they're in entrepreneurs as well. And we check in with each other and say, what are your goals? Are you achieving them? Have you been on vacation? Did you take the day off? Did you go to the beach? Have you been exercising? That's what you said you wanted to do. So, getting people to hold you accountable is super, super important, because we can't really hold ourselves accountable. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, it's very impossible. And you mentioned that word no and everything. And I know that that's a very difficult word. And sometimes you want to be supportive of your friends, and sometimes they want to have you live their dreams when you're trying to live your own dreams. So a lot of times definitely have to say that word no, even though it's only two letters. A lot of times we have a hard time using those two letters. And I do know that that whole people pleasing can be an issue as well. I know that I've been guilty of that, but I just wanted your thoughts around that, because I think that even though it's a simple word, that a lot of times people treat it like it's a multi-letter word because they have a hard time saying no, even though it's literally only the words in and with the letters in and no and all in that
Isn't
space.
that
But
funny? I mean, it's funny, but it's not, because you're right. It's like it's two letters. Just say it. You know, I think the interesting thing is most people understand when you say no, it's us. We're the ones. We're the problem. Oh, look at that. Grab that mirror again. You might be part of the problem, right?
right.
And so just saying, if you feel like you need to tell them the reason, go for it, but you don't have to. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I can't have that. I can help you, but it won't be this week. I
Right.
won't be able to get to that for 10 business days. Is that okay? No. Okay. Well, I'll find you somebody else that can help you. Take care. Have a great day. So, I find we usually put more pressure on ourselves. Now, here's the other thing, Mark, that I find interesting is there are many people who will try to buy your services and uh, get you down to the lowest level financially and take advantage of you. Another way that I found over the past couple years, literally just the past couple years of getting rid of those people, is I increased my prices. And
Yeah.
then all the people who, like, oh, we just want to take advantage of you. We can't afford that. Bye. Now I
Yeah.
have time to help people who will pay that.
Yeah, it's that brain drain. A friend of mine talks about that regularly because he's in the event consulting business, and he talks about how people will want that brain drain and want that information, but don't necessarily always want to pay for it, or as you just say, pay ridiculously low rates and everything. So he's very frustrated and has definitely gone against that brain drain, and I can definitely relate to that as well. What do you think about the inner critic? Because that's something else we talk about on this show quite often, is that notion that we can be our worst enemies. I know that there have been relationships, there have been job opportunities, and a number of other ones that I was having that inner conversation with myself. And by the time I talked myself into it and went to the office and said, yeah, I'm ready to be such and such a job in the entertainment field, said job had left, or by the time that I wanted to ask said woman for a date, she had already gone out with a date with somebody else, or maybe even gotten engaged, and all along those lines. So I do know that that inner critic can be a dangerous tool as well. But I was wondering your take on that, because I do think it's something that we all face.
Yeah, I think so too. I really do. Like we're our best critic, right? We criticize ourselves when other people are like, that's not what I see. So, asking people in your inner circle for feedback, but then more importantly than that, because sometimes people in your inner circle will tell you what you want to hear, is getting involved in a community, even if it's an online community of other business owners, so that you can run ideas by each other. Just remember, it's about giving and taking, not just taking. Make sure you're giving back to other people. But I also learned as well that I know I do, I give. And then I get upset when that person keeps taking. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. It's kind of my fault because I haven't said no. I haven't put down a boundary, and I haven't told them that I'm upset with them. So now I'm over here all mad for no reason when I'm really the problem. So stop giving, or start, letting the person know you're taking more than you're giving, and I can't work with you anymore. Even if it's a barter system as well. And that's the one last thing I did want to say is about a barter system. As an entrepreneur, you could find other companies, like you could find a marketing company who needs HR advice, and you could barter. I barter with my IT company. So they give me my IT support, and they're a very small entrepreneur, and then I give them HR support. And, we make sure we don't take advantage of each other. But so the bartering is a hard one too. You might still want to do a contract and track hours and things like that, but you don't have to go this alone. We need people. We need to do this all together. We're one big, not so happy society, but we should be, and we should be helping each other all over the country, all over the world.
No, I definitely agree with you. The last thing that I get all my guests to do, and this will be the last question before we totally get out of here, is if you can tell folks, and this has been a robust conversation, I'm glad we were able to finally connect and have this great conversation and learn a lot from each other, is I asked my guests, if they can tell how they can be contacted, since people have learned all this information from you and everything. And this is a global network, and you mentioned that earlier and everything. So I give my guests to give a message of positivity and hope for this global community. And those are the last two questions I've got for you: is how you can be reached, and a message
Sure.
of positivity and hope that you would like to share with our global community.
Sure. So my website's thehrlady.com. You could email me at wendy@thehrlady.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Wendy Sellers. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I have a YouTube. I have a podcast, The HR Lady, Instagram, you name it. You can connect with me any way possible. I can't help myself but respond, so I will. But there might be a little bit of a lack in time because I'm trying to gain my sanity back here in 2024.
Yep. And a message of positivity and hope that you want to share with our global community can be any message of positivity and hope that you want to share. It might even be some of those things and nuggets that you've already given us and everything.
Sure. I would just say, you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to read you my vision statement. I help people, specifically leaders, create successful companies from which employees do not desperately want a vacation from. So try to be that company. Try to be a company that gives employees vacation, but they're not just going on that vacation to get away from you.
That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that. That's a powerful message that I think a lot of people can relate to. We'll go out with that same little 30-second commercial that brought us in here and all along those lines. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and hopefully you can make a return trip either to this show or to the online dinner party in the not too distant future. But we're getting ready to get on out of here, and I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and hope you'll make a return trip in the not too distant future.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody.